Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week, we share a tequila cocktail with Josie McGarva, and we talk to her about her fistulizing and abscessing Crohn's disease, how opening up on social media and her ostomy empowered her and gave her confidence, her budding career in health psychology, including studying post-traumatic stress and health disparities in folks with inflammatory bowel disease, and of course, mental health and how aligning your body and mind can help with your disease. Cheers.
Hi, everybody. It's your host, Robin.
And it's your other host, Alicia. And today we are joined by Josie McGarva. Josie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Great. We are very happy to have you. I know you've got a lot to tell us, and I am very excited to hear about your research in particular. So be prepared. Very first question we always ask our guests, though, is before we ask you to tell us your disease journey is, what are you drinking?
Today, I am having a Mexican mule. So tequila, some ginger beer, some lime juice.
Oh, that sounds delicious. And you know what? I have some tequila, so that I might have to add that to my list. I'm inspired by a lot of our guests. So maybe our next one, I'll have to have myself a tequila drink. That sounds lovely.
You Robin, should try it. I'm tequila through and through.
I love it.
I am having the rest of my homemade sangria.
I do love a good sangria. I do love a good, and it's red wine sangria in particular.
Yes. Merlot specifically.
Got it. I had a very delicious champagne sangria. That was like when I was 16 and in Spain, my host family is like, here's champagne sangria. I was like, I love you people. This is great. I'm never leaving Spain. I am in fact drinking champagne today, hence like why I thought of this. So I'm having a little bit of pink champagne. So that's lovely.
And here's a fun fact. The reason our little Bowel Moments logo is holding a glass of champagne is because Alicia drinks so much champagne.
Oh no. I mean, I do have Champagne Fridays, and so I do feel like, and now today's Champagne Tuesdays, so maybe it's champagne all the days. Oh shit, that's not good, guys.
It's fine, but that's why I gave her a glass of champagne to hold. Yes.
Thanks, Robin. Well, Josie, this is not about me, it's about you. So will you start us out again? Second question we ask everybody is, tell us a little bit about your disease journey. So how are you connected to our IBD community?
Yeah, it's a long one, but I'll jump right in. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 13. I was going to just a regular physical with my pediatrician, and they noticed I was way below the growth curve for what I should be at 13 years old, and then did some blood work. And luckily, my pediatrician right away was like, oh, this could be Crohn's disease or colitis, which is kind of unusual. I feel like a lot of people have a pretty long diagnosis journey. So I got sent to a GI doctor at Children's Hospital, Colorado, got a colonoscopy done, and a few weeks later, had a diagnosis, which was pretty scary at 13 years old. I had no idea what IBD was, no idea what it was like to even live with a disease. But at the same time, it was also gave me kind of an explanation for why I was not normal per se. That was my whole thing as an adolescent with a disease, was trying to feel normal and fit in with my peers. And then, so I've had it for, I think I'm at 11 years now. I just passed my 11-year anniversary. And
happy anniversary, I guess.
Thank you. No, this was a good one. This was my first year of remission, which comes down later, but so yes, I was diagnosed at 13. I was in 8th grade, got on my first treatment, which was NG tube feedings. So I don't know if the listeners know this, but basically it's a tube that goes into your nose, down your throat, and into your stomach, and pumps nutrient-rich formula through this tube. It's easily digestible and can help with inflammation too. Mm-hmm. So that's the only treatment I was on for 2 years, were those NG tube feedings. And I would put the tube in every night, take it out the next morning, and go to school, because again, wanted to feel normal, didn't want a tube dangling off my face all day. And then that stopped working. I started developing allergies to the formula, actually. I don't know if allergies is the right word, but I just couldn't handle it. I would get really nauseous. So then I moved to taking Imuran, and with steroids mixed in all throughout. And then I was pretty much stable, not remission, but I was like in a pretty stable disease state all through high school until I went to college. I was a biochemistry major originally, wanting to be a doctor, a pediatric GI. And in college, the stress just really got to me and my disease got really bad. Freshman year, I think I went on and off of steroids 4 times. And then by the end of freshman year, I had developed my first of many perianal abscess and had to have surgery for that. And I had no idea what was going on. I just got this weird pain, like pain in my ass, literally. And had I went to my school doctor, like my college's doctor's office, to get it checked out because I had no idea that this could be anything related to Crohn's disease. And at the time I was transitioning from my pediatric GI to adult GI, so I wasn't established with a GI doctor yet. So that was a pretty scary part of my journey. So I ended up getting surgery for that, found my surgeon who ended up being first name basis with me and my family. And for, I think in 2 years, I had 11 surgeries for perianal abscess and fistula, getting setons placed, catheters placed. Meanwhile, I was in college the entire time. And then I also studied abroad in Spain, Alicia. And
well, muy bien.
Muy bien.
That's the end of my Spanish now. Sorry.
But I was there in the midst of my abscess cycle, but I went anyways because I'm not the kind of person to let Crohn's ruin my plans. And I was set to study abroad for 3 months, but it got cut short. I was there for about 6 weeks, had to come home, have another surgery. And then I decided that enough was enough with that. So I got a temporary ileostomy place in, I think that was in 2017. I don't know. I feel like I'm reporting to my new doctor, like, this is everything that has happened. I had a temporary ileostomy place, was supposed to have that for a year, but I still had a few more abscesses even with the ostomy. So I ended up having that for 2.5 years. Got it reversed last April. So I've been a year ostomy free almost. And once the ostomy came off, I got tests done and now here I am in remission. And that was, I think I've had 21 surgeries since 2016.
Wow. You really do know
I
your
feel like
surgeon.
We just need to pause for a second and just say congratulations. Like, yes, this has been a journey to get to remission. Like, I feel like we need to.
We're cheersing. We're cheersing to remission, man. That's a hard one.
We just need to, like, after that story, just take a moment to be grateful for remission, and then now you can ask your question.
Thank you, Robin.
So I want to ask you, and keeping in mind that you are not a gastroenterologist, so you're giving the layman's definition, but you said a couple of things that perhaps people are not as familiar with. So you mentioned that you had abscesses, perianal abscesses. So tell us what that is in your words.
So basically, Crohn's disease causes inflammation and can deteriorate your intestines. So what happens is what's called a fistula formed off of my rectum, and it's basically just disease eating away at healthy tissue. So there was a track going from my rectum to just healthy tissue, like in my butt cheek, basically, which fills with fluid and all the things that pass through your rectum. So nothing fun.
No.
And it doesn't have a way to exit the body. So it fills up, and that's what causes an abscess.
Okay. That's bad. You don't want one of those. They sound very unpleasant and very painful. So, okay, got it. Yeah. And what they do to treat that is sometimes they will put in something called a seton drain, which is literally a drain. Like, it's a little tube that goes out of the abscess so that it takes all that stuff away. Correct?
Right. So I've had both. Good job.
Thanks.
I've had both setons and catheters. So a catheter, I think people are more familiar with, but it's a hard plastic tube that they would insert into the abscess, and then it would come out to the exterior of my body, not through my rectum. So they would cut an incision up to the abscess and put this catheter in there. And then the setons are more, they look like rubber bands, kind of, that loop from your rectum through the fistula into the abscess and then out to the exterior of your body. And those are meant to keep the abscess actually with a tract open to the exterior so that it doesn't refill. Because a catheter only stays in for a few weeks and then they take that out. So the seton keeps that open. So you still have an open tract and you still get drainage, but it's not filling up an abscess.
And it's my understanding this is really only with folks with Crohn's disease, unfortunately. Fortunately and unfortunately, it's, what a weird comment to make, Alicia. I feel like this is just for people with Crohn's disease.
It's definitely more common in Crohn's. I do have one friend who had a J pouch with UC who has had abscesses and fistulas from the J pouch, but that was because of that surgery, not a normal colitis thing.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you giving us a little bit of fun facts in there, just because I know some of our audience might be newer to the IBD community. And so I want to make sure that they don't feel left out. Now, the question that immediately popped into my brain as you were talking about all of this is all of this happened. And also you are still a very young person. all of this happened like right at the time when like you're wanting to like meet people and maybe like date people.
Yeah.
And I feel like what you described probably wouldn't make dating super comfortable. So do you mind talking about this? You can tell me no. You can always tell me no, but do you mind talking about like how did you navigate college and parties and dating and all of these things that college students do when you had all of this going on?
Yeah. Definitely having pus coming out of your butt is not the most sexy thing. So
I mean, it could be sexy. It could be sexy.
I mean, there are audiences for all things, Josie. I don't know that you want to meet those people.
I know.
A little kinky, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. So in college, I did not date much. I think part of it was that I was so busy with school and Crohn's. Those were my two main things. I mean, there were people here and there, but no, nothing really serious. And honestly, once I got my ostomy, I became so much more confident in myself, which is kind of seems a little backwards, I think. But for me, it was the first time that I got to pick what was going on with my disease. It was an option for me. I didn't have to have the ostomy at that time, but I was like, no, we're doing it. So it was pretty empowering to make that choice. And also just gave me some not weird, but gave me this confidence where my disease was now visible because no one could ever see it before. And no one, even as much as I talked about it, people didn't have a visual of, oh, you have something wrong with you. So that was like, it was kind of a cool thing to now be able to show people like this exists and it has been going on for years. I haven't been making it up. So I got this newfound confidence and started dating more. But even before the ostomy, anytime I was seeing someone, it was definitely came up as a topic of conversation. I wouldn't get into the nitty gritty abscess fistula stuff, but definitely talking about Crohn's and how much of an impact it had on my life.
I just want to give props to you for making the choice to have surgery. I have said multiple times that surgery is a treatment option and not a last resort. So thank you for being an example of that and being willing to share and like going out and living your best life with the ostomy. Like, thank you. So surgery is a treatment option, people, not a last resort.
Yes. It's scary though. I mean, don't get us wrong. Surgery is a scary proposition all of the time, but yes, sometimes making that choice means that you do have very different quality of life, even if it's just for 2.5 years.
Definitely.
The other thing I definitely wanted to talk to you about, and I already mentioned this, but I am curious. So you wanted to become a GI doctor. Life took its toll. And so you decided to change courses, but you are still very much in our community. And so talk to us about how did you then change what major you decided to do and how did having IBD, obviously IBD influenced your first career decision. How did it obviously influence this other one too, but talk to us about kind of how you took that path and what are you focusing on now?
Yeah. So I'll kind of backtrack a bit. In 7th grade, before I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, my dream job was to be a fashion designer and live in New York City and live this glamorous life. And then I got Crohn's disease. I was tiny, teeny, and so skinny, and no clothes looked good on me. And I kind of lost my love for fashion for a little while. Now it's back in full swing. But I also decided that I needed to do something bigger for the world. Not that fashion design isn't great, but something that meant more to me and other people. So that's why I decided I wanted to be a GI doc. And honestly, at that time, that's like the only way I really knew to help this community was to be a doctor. It made the most sense. And then in college, so I was originally biochem, was getting sick all the time and decided I needed to take a step back. So I did just biology instead of biochem, which is equally as difficult, but not quite as stressful in my mind. And for a bio major, you're required to take a psychology class. So I took my first psych class and I was like, whoa, this is actually pretty cool. And started becoming very interested in psychology. And then my junior year, right before I was gearing up to take the MCAT, I discovered a field in psychology called health psychology. And health psychologists can do a vast array of things, but in short, their role is to support lifestyle modifications and healthy habits for anyone in the general population. But you can also use health psychology to specialize like you would as a doctor. So you can specialize in cardiac or GI or whatever it may be. So I discovered that, changed my ideas, and now I am in training to be a GI health psychologist. I'm currently in my master's at Northwestern, and I work under Dr. Tiffany Taft, who is an amazing amazing part of our community, heading so much important research, and who has Crohn's disease herself. And it was kind of a match made in heaven. I applied for my PhD in fall of 2020 to multiple different schools. I didn't even apply to Dr. Taft's lab, and I didn't get into the PhD program. And then Dr. Taft sent me an email and was like, hey, I saw your application for the PhD program. I know you wanted your PhD. I can give you a master's. And I think our research would really go hand in hand. And it was like a dream come true, because she's doing everything that I have ever wanted to do.
That's
So
awesome.
that was awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what a great mentor. I mean, she's been in the field obviously longer than you. And you're right.
Mhm.
I mean, her research is revolutionary. And so I think what a match made in heaven. Like you said, that's so awesome. So what are you focusing on specifically?
So currently I'm working on projects that Dr. Taft had already had grants for, but right now we're looking at a few studies that are very preliminary. We don't have any data from yet, but one of them is looking at heart rate variability, which is the change in time between heartbeats and its association with fatigue in patients who have IBD. So fatigue is like a huge symptom for everyone in remission or not. And heart rate variability, there's no like, this is the right number of what your heart rate variability should be, but the higher it is, the per se healthier you are. So we're thinking that people who have a lot of fatigue would have lower heart rate variability. And if we find that association, then hopefully we can establish some sort of intervention to increase heart rate variability and ease fatigue symptoms.
Super fascinating. Wow. Yeah. Like, I don't know that I would ever have put that together. That's so cool.
I know Dr. Taft comes up with all these ideas. That's just one of the things I'm doing. I'm doing a lot more. Tiffany Taft focuses a lot on PTS, post-traumatic stress in people with IBD.
Yeah.
So I've been helping her with some of those projects as well. She found, before I was her student, she did a study that found that 25% of IBD patients meet criteria for post-traumatic stress syndrome based on experiences with disease. Robin's raising her hand.
It's because I talk so much. She has to do that.
No. I am raising my hand because I probably fall into that 25%, but also, dear listeners, for the 15 people who are listening now, I have a 5-month-old puppy and she is trying to pull my arm off playing with the toy. So I'm keeping myself on mute during this episode. So Alicia, please ask away, because otherwise you will hear barking and growling and this toy that makes the weird noise that's not quite a squeak. So
I was going to say, at some point I did hear like just a little squeaky noise. And I'm like, oh, the puppy.
Yeah,
the puppy is really
so
cute. Talk more about PTS. If you're able and willing, talk to us about this. Because yes, when I saw your research on this, I saw that you and Tiffany were collaborating on this. I'm like, this is what needs to happen in our world, because the things that people describe to us, and even just talking to people about their experiences being in the hospital and all these things, I was like, this is definitely in my social work and bachelor's level psychology degree, I'm like, hell yeah, this is PTS. So talk to us about it. I'm here for it.
So the study that Tiffany did, she just did a survey, sent it out to different IBD patients, and used a rating scale that they use to diagnose PTSD in any sort of trauma. And there's 4 different categories that this scale then falls into. I don't know if I know them off the top of my head, but it's like re-experiencing trauma, avoidance behavior. There's 2 other ones. I have a presentation on this tomorrow. I should probably study up.
Oh shit. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. It's on my PowerPoint, so I can read off that when I do it tomorrow. But basically, the questionnaire that we gave out, or Dr. Taft gave out, was asking these questions specifically to IBD. So do you re-experience events that happened when you were in the hospital, traumatic events that happened when you were in the hospital, per se? That could be, I don't know if that's exactly the wording of the question, but that's an example of it. And yeah, we found that 25% of people met criteria. So they could fall into one of those 4 categories of these PTS symptoms. And the greatest cause for PTS we found is hospital experiences. We have a paper in progress for publication on this, actually. So you'll be getting the real research coming your way soon.
That's exciting.
But it could be anything from doctors not listening to your concerns, or being anxious while you're in the hospital. Or one was like, someone would come in and say, so yeah, we're going to do your ileostomy surgery now, without even like discussing it before, things like that.
Right.
There's some like anecdotal evidence that we have collected. But it's definitely, I mean, we don't call it PTSD because it's not established to be that yet. It's just post-traumatic stress at this rate. But it's definitely, it shows up. Like I was talking to a friend the other day who's having surgery, and she was like, I'm so scared to have the catheter after surgery because of the bad experiences I've had from it before. And before working with Tiffany, I didn't even put two and two together that this is something that exists. And I honestly think greater than 25% of IBD patients would meet criteria. It's just,
I would agree with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
maybe they don't score the 30 points or above that they need to on the thing, but probably pretty darn close.
Sorry, Marie has joined the podcast. It's not surprising to me. It would not be surprising to me if it was more than 25%. Honestly, like we were talking, our last guest was a woman named Hannah, and she went into surgery and woke up with an ostomy, and she knew it was a chance, but she'd had 2 other surgeries with no ostomy, and then so it was really one of these things. And how many people do we know that they go into the hospital, they're really sick, and they wake up with a diagnosis and an ostomy, and so even just that sudden change of life just is a real trigger point, I think, for a lot of people. But even being in a hospital for as much stuff as is done to you, like you're poked, you're prodded, it feels like that consent gets a little gray, and so
Right.
I just feel like there's lots of room for there to be trauma that happens in a hospital.
And there have been a lot of studies done on this post-traumatic stress in people who have been in the ICU or cancer patients. And those were all published prior to Dr. Taft doing this research. So she was like, why wouldn't this be a thing in IBD? And the percentage is comparable, if not more, than some of the other disease populations that have been studied. I never thought anything of it, like I said. And then once I started being a part of this research, I was like, oh, for sure, sign me up for that. Yep, check. I need all of that. And
I think there's a lot we're learning. I think there's, like the role of trauma and the role of this, like, post-traumatic stress. And, and one of our past guests, Stacey Collins, we were talking to her about just also disordered eating. So about how people don't necessarily consider an eating disorder to be anything other than what's sort of already established, but that a lot of the behaviors we see in folks with IBD, where you're, eliminating entire food groups and withholding and all these things, really counts as disordered eating. And so I think there's a whole spectrum of things that we don't necessarily associate with people living with IBD or other chronic illnesses, and that are really perhaps starting to be researched and coming into consciousness for a lot of our folks. So I think it's definitely there. That's very cool. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. I am too. And on that note of eating disorders, Dr. Taft and I have also had many conversations about that and IBD patients being diagnosed with ARFID, which stands for Avoidant Restricted Food Intake Disorder, which is what you have to do when you have a disease that impacts your digestive tract.
Yep.
But doctors who are unaware will diagnose you and put a mental health condition on you that doesn't need to be there.
Well, or sometimes perhaps well-intentioned dietitians that don't know inflammatory bowel disease may say, oh, cut this, cut that, not necessarily seeing the full picture of this is somebody who's already cut out like all dairy and all of this and all, no vegetables and no dairy. And so you're further restricting somebody whose diet is already restricted. And so I think you just have to be really careful, and how you go about getting additional medical advice. Probably not from a podcast and not from me would be number one.
Yeah, we're not telling anyone anything.
We do have professionals and people who are smart and study this stuff like Josie, and we just try to ask them the right questions, right? I mean,
yes. Hopefully we're getting there. Yes.
Hopefully.
You had a recent study that you guys did oh gosh darn it, what's the name of it? An abstract?
I did a poster presentation at Congress. I was looking at the post-traumatic stress, that same idea, but we looked at it in underrepresented minority populations. So the original study that we published was majority white participants. So this time around, the majority of this second study was South and Southeast Asian participants, but we had some Hispanic, Black, Native American, Pacific Islander mixed in there too. And we found that, what's the exact number? Like 43%, I think, of underrepresented minority patients met criteria for PTS, for post-traumatic stress.
Wow.
So the number is almost double in underrepresented minority populations.
I mean, did you, I suppose not, because it's such a broad swath of people, Like, what do you think would be the reason why that you see such an increased number? Is it just that you were asking different questions than the white people were getting, and so therefore it's just you think this is a more representative number of how many people are struggling with it? Or do you think there's other things on top of, like, not being believed when you go to get diagnosed, things like that?
Yeah, I think so. The study we sent out was the exact same one that the original white population took, but it was just only given
Right.
to minority populations. I think that that would be the case for minorities in any sense, in
Yeah.
any hospital experience or medical experience, not necessarily with IBD. And that's going into a whole slew of reasons why that I'm sure we can all think of on our own terms. But it definitely is a cause for concern, and hopefully physicians and healthcare professionals seeing that number will make a change in the way that they're treating everyone, especially these minority patients. And I think it also just comes from deep mistrust in healthcare from minorities that goes way back and unfortunately is not going anywhere anytime soon. But we need to take some action on that for sure. And hopefully the people doing this research, like me and Dr. Taft, can make some change there.
That is pretty remarkable of a number.
Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate.
Do you mind if I ask a question, Alicia?
No, that's why I didn't say anything, because I was like, she's off mute. So I'm just going to sit here and wait her out.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go there. I'm taking us back to the beginning. When you told your diagnosis story and you said that you were just getting a regular physical from your pediatrician and you were small for your age.
Mm-hmm.
So had you not experienced any symptoms? Like that has stuck with me this whole time that you've been talking. Like, how could you just go to the doctor and they find out because you're, small for your age? It's like I'm baffled.
I honestly don't remember it that clearly, but I know that I had been having a lot of stomach pain. Like I would remember coming home from school and laying on the couch and putting a heating pack on my stomach and drinking ginger ale. It wasn't every day. I don't think it was enough to be a cause for concern to my parents necessarily, but there were symptoms going on. And then after I saw my pediatrician, it probably took 2 months, I'd say, before I got the diagnosis. And in that time, I was deteriorating quickly.
Yes.
So maybe we caught it more earlier on before the symptoms were really coming in. At the same time, my best friend, my first ever best friend that I couldn't live without, was moving away to a whole different state. So for a 7th grader, that's a pretty big stressful thing. So I've always attributed it to stress. And I know a lot of people say that, and physicians don't always think that that's a cause for disease to come up, but that's all I could think of at that time.
Stress is a killer, man. And, we always talk about all the different components that have to come together in order for your immune system to be triggered, right? There's a genetic component, and there's an environmental component, and there's your microbiome, and all of these things play a part. And my question is always like, well, why can't stress be the trigger? Why are you telling me that stress is not the thing that turned it on? I feel like it's a viable option. Again, do not have a medical degree. I am not a practicing physician. I just have 20 years experience with IBD. That's it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, stress invokes the nervous system response, and your nervous system can promote inflammation. So it doesn't make sense to me why people still don't think that it's an actual cause of flares or disease severity. It definitely can be. And the mechanisms are there. The biological mechanisms do exist between the stress response and a heightened immune response.
Well, and I could also see, especially adults who are kind of assholes at times, like poo-pooing that as like, oh, but whatever, you're a kid. Like, why is that a big deal? But when you're that age and that's your best friend forever, like that's a huge deal. And so of course that's going to be something that's going to trigger, a stress response in you. And so I don't know. I feel like we put too much, people don't take these things seriously. Like that's what's traumatic for me is going to be different for you, is going to be different for Robin. And so, but our bodies are going to react the same way, I don't know.
Most definitely.
Calm
and
down.
That's why, so on my career path, I hope to be a pediatric GI psychologist. So I want to work with kids, mostly adolescents, just because I feel like that was the time when the disease and coping with disease was hardest for me. And also from my experience at Camp Oasis, I just love love working with IBD kids. So that's the goal. And I feel like having that lived experience is really helpful in that regard. And I would have loved to have someone on my medical team that knew what I was going through.
Yeah. Bless your heart for working with adolescents. I can't imagine. I don't know that would be something I would choose, but I also don't have any kids. So therefore, like, I don't know. They seem hard. They seem real hard and real judgy. I don't know.
Oh, for sure they are, but they need the help.
Yes, absolutely. So yes. And I do feel like it would feel different coming from somebody like you who actually has lived with the disease and they could sort of, you're able to go back, like, I get it. Somebody like me, they'd be like, shut up, old lady. And it'd be fine. I would agree with them at that point.
I'd let you treat me, Alicia.
Oh, thanks.
I guess I'm an adult now, but back then.
Say that
doesn't
now.
count because you're an adult. That's right. It doesn't count.
Nope. It's only because you're drinking as well, just as a note.
Yeah.
So you mentioned camp and getting that type of social support from when you were a counselor. I think you also said you had gone as a camper. Is that right?
I did when I was first diagnosed. So I think it may have been a year after my diagnosis. I was 14 and I went to camp. I only went once as a camper. I was on the NG tube at that time when I went to camp. And even though it was a camp filled with other people with IBD, I was the only one on an NG tube. So still felt different and almost sicker than everyone else. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
So in the moment, I did not have the best camp experience, but reflecting back on it, I am so grateful for it. I have some of my best friends still from the time that I was a camper. Actually, Sam Golden, who you guys interviewed on the first episode, she was a counselor when I was a camper. And then
that's amazing.
Maybe 7 years later, I went back to camp as a counselor and Sam shows up as a nurse. And I was like, wait, I know you. I know you somehow.
Oh,
so
yay.
Now we were like co-workers per se at camp together. And I've stayed in touch with her ever since.
Oh my gosh. I bet she was such a fun counselor too. Like so fun.
She so was. She honestly was the one who made me feel the most at home. I loved Sam. We have a picture together of me as a camper and we both had like fake mustaches on. And then when we were back at camp as a counselor and a nurse, we recreated the picture and have it all grown up version.
I love that so much.
You have to share those with us. We can do a throwback to Sam's episode so people can go back and listen to her. Cause yeah, she also talks about going to camp, I believe, right, Robin?
I'm sure she did. That's her favorite thing.
There's also been some other social sort of support things that you've gotten involved with, I believe. And so talk to us a little bit, because you've obviously sought out these types of opportunities. So talk to us a little bit about how did you get involved in these things? How did you choose what you were going to get involved in? And what do you think is the biggest benefit?
For sure. So like I said, when I was first diagnosed, I was all about trying to be normal. I didn't tell anyone about my diagnosis or disease. I was just home from school all the time, or the girl that had to leave sick, or the girl that was always going to the bathroom. And maybe people didn't think that, but in my head, that's how I framed myself. And then junior year of high school, I had an assignment for my English class to write a personal narrative. Everyone had to do it, and it could be whatever you wanted it to be on. And I did mine on my Crohn's journey. And my teacher, he read my paper and he was like, Josie, this is so good. You have to share it with the class. Like other people, everyone could share if they wanted to. And I wasn't going to, but he was like, you need to. It's brilliant. I read it now and I'm like, what the hell was that writing? But anyways.
It was brilliant. Don't you disparage was a junior year of high school Josie. Yeah. She did amazing.
So I shared it with the class and no one treated me any differently, but it felt like a ginormous weight off my shoulders to have like now not have to hide this thing about me. And from that moment on, I turned into, I guess I would coin myself as an advocate for IBD. And I started getting involved with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. I think the first thing I did was Take Steps. I was the honored hero for Take Steps once. And then once I decided that I was going the psychology route, I got involved with some support groups through the Rocky Mountain chapter of the foundation. So I worked with IBD Club, which is a support group for kids. It's basically like an extension of camp. And everyone that came to it were kids that I would see at camp. So that was awesome and fun. And then I also started a young adult support group, also with the Rocky Mountain chapter. And for that, we would just go out to a restaurant and drink and just just hang out, all people with IBD, you know, just trying to be normal. The conversation would always surround IBD, but that was the point of it. And I also started an Instagram account for Crohn's disease, and I was just sharing my story on there, and it was like so empowering just to be able to process everything in a way that it didn't even need to be public facing, but it kind of gave me a reason to process things that I otherwise wouldn't. And I started it in college, like in the height of when I was going through surgery after surgery. I had the shortest amount of time I had between surgeries was 11 days. And then the most was 6 months for like 3 years. That was my cycle.
Whoa, 11 days. You're not even healed from the first surgery. Holy cow.
I know. It was crazy. But having this place to just talk and also connect with so many other people who have had experiences like me was amazing. So I think that has definitely been one of the biggest supports for me. And I think supportive things that a lot of people have reached out and I think really benefit from it, which was not my intent, but it's amazing that it has turned that way.
So if you want to follow Josie on Instagram, her handle is
@it_takes guts, because it does. Even if you don't have all your guts, it takes them.
It does.
And we will be sure to link to it as well so people can follow you. Okay, so from the site, and Robin, I'm sorry, if you have a question, feel free to tell me to shut up. From the psychological perspective though, like, so from your professional, putting your professional hat back on, I am super curious about, so you're talking about interacting with people strictly on social media. Like for the most, you don't know these people, you don't ever meet them in person. I think it's really interesting because one of our most recent guests, Caroline, also has had a really strong connection with people just on social media, has met some people that are like now her best friends, people that are in her wedding, things like that. Like she's made some real friendships via social media. And to me, as somebody who grew up with like no internet and Oregon Trail and a disc when I was in the 6th grade, like there is a part of me that just kind of doesn't understand this whole like forming really strong bonds and really strong relationships via a medium like this. Robin is shaking her head at me. She's like, old lady.
You sound so old, Alicia.
I just think this is really fascinating. So like from a psychological perspective, like, is there something to this? And like, is it people like me that clearly can't ever meet friends on social media because I'm too goddamn old?
No, I'm waiting for you to say, hey kids, get off of my lawn.
Get off my
right
fucking lawn, kids. Honestly, I think I have actually said that to some children before, but I had just seeded. So
okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. You can answer, Josie, but seriously.
Thank you for calling me out. Thank you for calling me out. Yes, everyone, I am not a boomer, but I kind of feel like it some days.
Now we know why Alicia doesn't treat kids, adolescents.
I don't. No, that would be a very poor choice. And in fact, I had somebody in grad school tell me, maybe not counseling for you. That's not a good choice. I was like, I'm sort of wounded by this. Stephen Applewhite, if you're listening to this, I remember. But it was true. He was right. He was right. Clearly. We all know that now. Clearly.
I guess to answer your question, I don't know if I can comment so professionally on the social media connection thing, but I can give my unprofessional opinion. I have had technology for most of my life, but I don't think I started using social media until high school. So I know what it was like to grow up without social media, which I am so thankful for, because even though I use it, I don't enjoy it necessarily. I think it can be a very meaningful way to find resources and to connect with people who are similar to you that may not exist in your everyday life, in your everyday environment. And I definitely think it's possible to make connections on social media and be friends with these people beyond a screen. I have not quite had that experience. I mean, I haven't had a bad experience, but as far as my Instagram account goes, it's been more of an educational resource for me than anything. Like following some of these accounts who, especially when I got my ostomy, I had no idea how to care for an ostomy or live with an ostomy. And the amount of accounts I found on there with tips and tricks for changing your pouch or certain clothes to buy that would conceal it or support it was amazing. It's like a huge resource. And now that I've witnessed that, that's kind of what I aimed for my account to be, was to provide that for other people. I have a lot of IBD friends on there who I had known previously, not through Instagram, but I think having this shared thing has made our relationship much stronger through the screen or without it. But yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that.
What does the old lady want to ask now?
All I can think of is like, I just have visions of catfishing going on in my head. Like, how many people have catfished you? No, I'm joking. I watch too much reality television. This is really how this goes. So
Catfish, that's a good show, actually.
Do you know they have a UK version now? So just, I will cut all this out, I promise, but still, yeah, there's a UK version. It's pretty amazing. Like, I think you need to add that to your queue. It's
Okay, I will.
I don't feel like you need to cut this out. I mean, this is real talk about real life.
but it's not the realities of IBD. So it's
Sure
just,
it is.
it's just Alicia's weird proclivities. So we're
I
gonna
can comment and say majority of my interactions from social media have been positive, but I have had some negative comments or people being like, this is disgusting, I can't believe you're posting this, or pictures when I would post my stoma would get reported. And there's plenty of accounts that have had that same situation go on. So it's not all rainbows and butterflies on Instagram.
I wonder why this stoma would get flagged. I mean, like, I don't know, it feels fairly innocuous.
I mean,
it's not
it's
like a
just
nipple.
Right, which also I don't know why that would get flagged, but still.
Fair. Good point. Good point. We all have them, and yet somehow they get flagged.
Yeah.
Which is a whole separate conversation of why do men have nipples anyway, but anyway, well, that's a whole different conversation. You're getting unvarnished Alicia tonight. Great.
I think Alicia needs more champagne.
I was about to say the same thing. How much champagne did you drink before we started recording?
None. Well, okay. Before Josie got on, I had like a little teensy bit, but only like it's been one glass, and I still have a third of the glass left. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm gonna get a real reputation, guys. I don't know about this. I don't appreciate y'all.
You should have me on more frequently. I'll get there with you.
I love it. I love it. Robin, what am I missing? Which good timing. I asked you just as you took a drink.
Did everyone hear me drink my sangria? Was it loud? What are we missing? Well, apparently I'm missing 2 brain cells to rub together to come up with a question at this point in time.
Robin started a new job like yesterday, so I feel like we need to give her a pass.
Congratulations, Robin.
My next question might align with a little bit of what you were talking about when you mentioned your research, but mental health and chronic illness, mental health and IBD, like how is that different? How does it need to be addressed? I mean, me personally, over the past year, I actually started having panic attacks and like legitimately had to start seeing a therapist to try to help me process, things that were going on. And Alicia and I both talk about mental health a lot on the podcast because mental health is physical health.
Yeah.
So with what you're studying and the research that you're doing and being a patient for 11 years, so how does this tie together for you?
Yeah, I have had quite the mental health journey that matches my disease journey, pretty sporadic. I think definitely when I was first diagnosed and struggling with disease acceptance and adjusting my lifestyle to now being a chronically ill patient, I didn't realize that there was this whole mental process going on that was really messing with my day-to-day quality of life. And then once I started having surgery after surgery, it turned into this cycle of really bad anxiety, honestly, of I'm never going to be better, like just waiting for the next bad thing to happen because it was happening so often. And I went to my GI doc. This was, I don't know if I had my ostomy bag yet. I think it was right after I got my ostomy, where I was also so anxious and had been experiencing some pretty bad depression leading up to that, but never diagnosed. I self-diagnosed all these things. But I went to my GI doc. He did the normal physical checkup. How are your IBD meds, yada, yada. And then at the end, he was like, okay, is there anything else I can do to make your life better? And I said, honestly, I have been pretty anxious lately. Like my ostomy bag tends to leak at random times, and I'm always anxious that it's going to leak, or I'm always anxious that I'm going to have another abscess. And he was like, all right, I can write you a prescription for Xanax. And that was that. And we walked out, and I looked at my mom and I go, yeah. I was like, Mom, don't you think he should have like referred me to a therapist or something? She was like, oh, I never would have even thought that could be an option. I think it's this whole generational thing of mental health not mattering, which is fucked up. Excuse my language, but I am passionate about that.
Yeah, no, it is.
So I did the work myself to start going to therapy because I was in school for this. I know medication sometimes is necessary for mental health concerns, but I think there are a lot of steps you can take prior to taking these medications.
Or in coordination with the medication.
Or yes, as well. So I started trying to find a therapist. I always say finding a therapist is like dating. It's not going to be right the first time. And it's frustrating because you have to go over all these things over and over again until you find the right fit, which took me, I think I probably saw 4 therapists before I found the one that was right for me. And she was amazing. She's back in Colorado and she's a health psychologist. And I just unpacked everything. And you don't even realize all the shit that builds up and has really been affecting you until you get a chance to like say it all. So that, aside from me already being in this field, that just kind of that personal experience really showed me how important it is to care for your mental health. And I used to always, when I'm really sick, I feel like my mind and body are 2 completely different things because my body is debilitated and in bed, and my mind is either anxious and sad or wanting to do all these things that I physically can't do. And I have always felt like this just extreme dissonance between mind and body. And after going to therapy, and I also really found a love for yoga and some other hobbies, and I found a way to align my mind and body a little more. Of course, it's not always perfect, but that anecdote hopefully just shows how important it is to care for your mental health, even when you're good and healthy. Like your brain is a muscle. You have to train it and exercise it to be there for you in bad times and in the best of times. It requires maintenance. And that's why I'm getting into this field, especially for people with chronic illness, because that's just a whole nother layer. Like life as a human being is hard enough. Now throw this next thing on top of it. Like, what do you expect from us? How much can we take?
Yes. I will say that I started seeing a therapist for the very specific reason of managing my panic attacks, right? Previously, I would self-diagnose and manage it on my own, tools, tricks, whatever I learned to do to get me through that process. But I also encouraged my children to see therapists. I have adult daughters. I'm assuming that I'm probably close to the same age as your mom, Josie. And, me having this chronic illness for 20 years definitely changed the way that I don't want to say change the way. I never thought of therapy as bad. I always encouraged my children to consider therapy whenever they were having, any kind of problem that would need that. Like I said, mental health is physical health. But for myself, like even once I got the panic attacks under control, I started spreading out my therapy visits. And then my therapist is like, so we kind of dug into something serious here. We should probably put our visits back closer together. And I'm like, you're probably right. Like the panic attacks are probably not the only thing over the past 20 years of living with a chronic illness that I have to talk to you about.
Right.
And even recently, like some really good positive things have been happening. And she's like, I want to hear about the good stuff too. Like, I don't want to just sit on the phone and cry with you. I want to, celebrate with you and support your joy too. So that was a lesson for me, even as a supporter of therapy, to embrace the fact that it's continuous. It needs maintenance. I'm not going to spread out visits between time between my visits with my therapist anymore, because you need the maintenance.
Well, and even positive changes change, and change is hard, so you do have to discuss with people, especially, some of the changes that you've made in your life are big changes, and yes, they're good, but it's still big change. And so there's the emotional toll that goes along with it, even if it's positive. So yeah, I say this all from the place of being like the worst person on therapy. So I love to tell other people to get therapy, but I am the worst patient, the worst. So sorry to my therapist who still is in Houston, and I haven't lived there for years. So he's not listening.
You never know.
Girl, she doesn't even have electronic billing. I'd have to mail her a check. She's not listening to a podcast. Bless her heart. She was wonderful. Like, best therapist. She is a therapist's therapist. Like, that was who I had to go to because I suck so bad at going to a regular therapist. Like, I had to get the one that's like, girl, I know these tricks. Like, you can't pull them. So
yeah. So Robin, you were mentioning that you should talk about the positive things. There's a construct in psychology called post-traumatic growth, and it's kind of the opposite of post-traumatic stress. And they can exist at the same time, but it's growing from and becoming not a better person, but just growing from traumatic things. And it happens in all sorts of different types of trauma. But hopefully that's one of the things I aim to study in my career is post-traumatic growth in IBD patients, because I think after all the shit that we all go through, we are some of the strongest, most badass people out there. Sorry to toot my own horn. But
Oh, I agree with that 100%. I feel like that is the story of the past 20 plus years of my life, post-traumatic growth. A novel by Robin, post-traumatic growth. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's my autobiography.
No,
That's
this
the title of
community
it.
is incredibly resilient. It's amazing.
I would not be the person I am today if I did not have this disease. And that is one thing that I am thankful for about Crohn's.
Agreed.
There's many things, but that's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And that
agreed.
must be such a I hate to say this, but it's a little bit of a mind fuck, isn't it? Like the fact that you are the person you are and you're as strong as you are because of this really kind of, shitty thing that's happened. That must be such like, I don't know, every once in a while do you sit back and go, gosh, what would I be without this? And
totally. I'd be a fashion designer in New York City. Life would be so great.
you don't know that that's a hard business too. That's not an easy
Alicia,
business.
Don't crush 13-year-old Josie's dreams.
Girl, I'm crushing that dream. I'm bad with children. I'd be like, that's not a good choice for you. Ready for the last question?
Ready.
We've talked about a lot of different things that all affect the IBD community, but if you could narrow it down to just one parting note, what would you want the IBD community to take away from this call? What is your one piece of advice?
Oh, there's so much good stuff. But I think the biggest thing would be that your disease does not define you. You are a person with a chronic illness. You are not a chronic illness patient. And sometimes it might feel like it's your entire world. It felt like mine for 10 years until I was in remission. But you can't let it stop you from living your life, no matter how hard it is, because you don't want that to be your legacy. Even if you can't get out of bed some days, that's okay. But know that you are more than that. You are more than your disease. And also care for your mental health. That's the last one.
Good one. That is a very good one. Josie, seriously, this was such a fun conversation, even though it was hard at times, for sure. It's such a fun conversation, and you are a true delight to have on. And I really can't wait to have you come back again as to talk even more about your research and what you're finding, because I feel like we are right at the tip of that iceberg, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So I'm stoked that you're going into this field and that we know you. And so you can come back and tell us all about it. So even better for us, mainly. It's really just me I'm thinking about at the end of that. Sorry.
You ladies are a delight too. And I'm so happy you're doing this podcast. It's needed.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, I'm Josie. Thanks for listening to my episode of Bowel Moments. If you liked this and want to hear more, please rate, review, subscribe, follow, and share with your friends.